The Galactic War Council was in session, and the room echoed with laughter. Alien leaders from different empires sat around a massive circular table, their holographic displays showing the image of humanity's latest warship, the Iron Fang. It was smaller than most battlecruisers, lacked the usual massive energy cannons, and had a strange angular design. The council members found it amusing. "This is their mighty warship," scoffed High Lord Vexler of the Selnary Empire, his sharp fangs gleaming as he grinned. "This tiny metal box." Other leaders chuckled, shaking their heads. The reptilian Grothoks smirked, their scales shimmering under the council's lights. The insectoid Click-Tack chattered in amusement, their mandibles clicking rapidly. Even the normally silent Dronians let out low, rumbling vibrations of approval. The humans always try to prove themselves, General Korvax of the Zulrath Dominion said. But this is pathetic. They have no idea what real power is. The council watched as a human ambassador appeared on the holoscreen. He was calm, his face unreadable. "The Iron Fang is ready for battle. We advise all hostile fleets to reconsider their actions." Laughter erupted again. Lord Vexlar leaned forward, sneering. "Reconsider? You should reconsider sending that toy into battle, human. Your kind will be nothing more than a footnote in history." The transmission ended. The human ambassador showed no anger, no fear, just a slight nod before the screen turned dark. It was as if he already knew something they didn't. A Selnary commander approached Lord Vexlar and saluted. "My lord, our fleet is ready. Should we proceed with the attack?" "Of course," Vexlar said, waving a hand dismissively. "Destroy them. Wipe out their defenses. Show them what real war looks like." The Selnary fleet, 500 warships strong, entered human space within hours. They expected resistance, but instead, they found nothing. No patrol ships, no defensive stations, just the cold silence of space. "Strange," muttered Admiral Xalthur, watching the battlefield from his flagship's bridge. "Are they really this foolish? They didn't even send a fleet to meet us." Then they saw it. A single warship drifting in the distance, the Iron Fang. It didn't move. It didn't fire. It simply floated there, like a dead husk. The Selnary fleet broadcasted a message. "Human vessel, you are outnumbered. Surrender immediately, or be destroyed." No response. Zulfur smirked and turned to his officers. "Fire at will. Let's put an end to this joke." The Selnary warships unleashed a storm of plasma fire, bright beams of energy streaking across space. But just before impact, the Iron Fang vanished. It disappeared from all scanners, as if it had never existed. Where did it go? An officer shouted in confusion. Dulfer narrowed his eyes, his claws gripping the control panel. "Find it. Now." But before his crew could respond, the flagship shook violently. Alarm sirens blared. The bridge filled with red emergency lights. "Admiral," another officer yelled, "one of our destroyers just exploded. We have no visual on the attacker." Zalthur's heart pounded. This wasn't right. This wasn't normal. Another explosion. Then another. Ships were vanishing from their formation, their debris scattering into the void. But there was still no sign of the Iron Fang. Panic spread through the fleet. They had mocked the warship, laughed at its design. But now, for the first time in Selnary history, they felt something they had never known before. Fear. The Selnary fleet floated in the darkness of space, confusion spreading like wildfire. The Iron Fang had vanished. One moment, it was there, a silent, unmoving target. And the next, it was gone, as if it had never existed. Admiral Xalthur stood on the bridge of his massive warship, eyes fixed on the empty void where the human vessel had been. "Impossible," he muttered. "No ship can just disappear like that." His officers scrambled at their consoles, their clawed fingers tapping furiously. The fleet's scanners swept the area, searching for any trace of the missing warship. There was nothing. "My lord," one of his commanders called out, "we are detecting anomalies." Zolther turned sharply. "What kind of anomalies?" The officer hesitated. I don't know how to describe it. Our sensors are picking up distortions in space, but no actual ship. It's as if a sudden explosion cut him off. The bridge shook violently as alarms blared through the ship. The crew staggered, gripping onto control panels for support. "Report." "Dissolve." Thur roared. A terrified officer shouted over the noise. "One of our battle cruisers just exploded. We didn't even detect an attack." On the massive viewing screen at the front of the bridge, the Selnary fleet was in chaos. A cruiser, one of their strongest warships, had been reduced to a burning wreck. Its debris drifted through space, the twisted remains of its once impenetrable armor reflecting the distant starlight. Still, there was no sign of the attacker. Another explosion. Then another. One by one, Selnary ships were being destroyed. Not by enemy fire they could see. Not by any visible weapon. They simply ceased to exist. "Shields up." Zolther bellowed. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers." The crew obeyed, but it was useless. The enemy, whoever they were, was not fighting a conventional battle. They were ghosts striking from the shadows, leaving no trace of their presence. A deep voice echoed through the fleet's communication systems, breaking through their encrypted channels with terrifying ease. "You wanted to see our warship," the voice said, calm and unshaken. "Now you will witness its full power." Zolther's blood ran cold. The humans. This was them. But how? The Iron Fang had been nothing more than a joke to the Galactic War Council, a ship with no obvious firepower, no impressive size, the primitive vessel built by a species that was supposed to be weak. And yet here they were, dying in the darkness, one by one, without even seeing their killer. The Selnary fleet fired wildly in every direction, their weapons lighting up the void with deadly plasma bolts. But they hit nothing. Then something even more terrifying happened. The entire fleet's navigation system went offline. The engines shut down. Their ships, which had once been part of the most feared armada in the galaxy, were now trapped. "We've lost control," one officer screamed. "Our hyperdrives are disabled," another shouted. Zolther gritted his teeth, his claws digging into the armrests of his command chair. "No," he whispered, "this can't be happening." Then, for the first time since the battle began, the Iron Fang revealed itself. It materialized out of the darkness, appearing just above the burning wreckage of a Selnary battleship. And it was no ordinary vessel. Its hull shimmered, shifting like liquid metal. It was absorbing energy, converting it into something far deadlier. Strange patterns ran along its surface, glowing faintly with an eerie, unnatural light. It was not just a warship. It was a predator. Zolther could no longer hear his officers, could no longer process the chaos around him. He could only stare at the Iron Fang, now understanding the truth too late. This was not a joke. This was not a mistake. The humans had built a monster. And now, it was feeding. The silence was worse than the destruction. Admiral Zolther stood frozen on the bridge of his flagship, his reptilian eyes locked onto the impossible sight before him. The Iron Fang hung in the void, a silent executioner. It did not move like a normal warship. It did not fire in predictable patterns. It did not even seem bound by the same laws of physics as other vessels. It was something else entirely. And it was hunting them. Across the Selnary fleet, panic spread like wildfire. Officers shouted over one another, demanding answers. Their scanners showed nothing but static. Their weapons locked onto empty space. The fleet's most advanced targeting systems had been blinded. "We can't see it," an officer wailed. "We can't track it. How are they?" The ship shook violently as another Selnary cruiser erupted into flames. A bright flash of light, a shockwave, and then nothing. The vessel was gone, reduced to nothing more than debris. Zolthar clenched his fists. Fire everything. I don't care if you have a target. Fill the void with plasma. Across the fleet, warships unleashed a devastating barrage. Plasma bolts, missile salvos, and disruptor beams flooded the darkness. For a moment, the battlefield became a burning storm of destruction, energy crackling through space in every direction. But the Iron Fang did not burn. It moved like a phantom, slipping through their fire as if reality itself bent around it. It flickered, one moment visible, the next, nothing but a whisper in the void. Then it struck again. A battleship, one of the Selnary Empire's largest and most powerful warships, simply ceased to function. There was no explosion, no fire. Its lights flickered out, its engines died, and it drifted lifelessly through the battlefield. Inside, its crew screamed in horror. Their control panels displayed unreadable symbols. Their weapons refused to fire. Their communications were filled with nothing but static. Then, in the pitch-black silence of their dying ship, a single message appeared on every screen. Run. Zolthar felt a cold dread creep into his spine. He turned to his officers. What is this? What's happening to our ships? They aren't just destroying us, one of his engineers whispered. They're shutting us down. They're killing us without even firing a shot. Another warship died. Then another. Some were vaporized instantly. Others were left intact, adrift in space, powerless, like tombs floating in the dark. The admiral gritted his teeth. This wasn't war. This wasn't strategy. This was annihilation. His second in command, a seasoned warrior with centuries of experience, turned to him with wide, fearful eyes. We have to retreat, Admiral. Now. Zolthar felt rage rise in his chest. The Excellenary never retreated. They had conquered entire worlds, crushed entire civilizations beneath their might. No species had ever made them run. But as he looked at the burning wreckage of his once invincible fleet, as he listened to the terrified screams of his officers, he realized something. This was not a battle they could win. Prepare the fleet for retreat, he said, forcing the words out. All remaining ships, activate hyperdrive and get us out of here. An officer scrambled at his controls, his claws trembling. Then his face went pale. Sir, our hyperdrives are offline. Zolthar felt his stomach drop. Impossible. No enemy had ever disabled Selnary hyperdrives. Their technology was the most advanced in the known galaxy. Their ships were built to be unstoppable. And yet, the truth was undeniable. The Selnary fleet was trapped. The communications channel crackled to life. A deep, human voice filled the bridge. Leaking so soon. It was calm, controlled, deadly. Zolthar gripped the edges of his command chair. Who are you? He demanded, his voice almost a growl. For a moment, there was silence. Then the voice responded. We are the species you mocked. Another explosion rocked the fleet. More warships vanished from the scanners. We are the civilization you called weak. A dreadnought, one of the largest ships in the fleet, was torn apart, its armor splitting as if it were made of paper. And we are here to end you. Zolthar felt the weight of those words settle over him like a death sentence. The Iron Fang moved forward, its hull shifting like liquid metal, absorbing the energy of the battlefield. It was learning, adapting. And it wasn't finished yet. The battlefield was no longer a battlefield. It was a graveyard. What had once been a mighty Selnary armada, feared across the galaxy, was now nothing more than shattered debris and silent, drifting warships. The Iron Fang had not just defeated them, it had broken them. Admiral Zolthar stood on the bridge of his crippled flagship, staring at the destruction through the massive viewing screen. His fleet was unrecognizable. Entire formations were gone, their locations now marked only by burning wreckage. All around him, his officers were in disarray. Some were frantically trying to restart systems that no longer responded. Others stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. And some, Some had simply collapsed in their seats, their bodies trembling as they realized the truth. They had lost. But the nightmare was not over. Zalthar clenched his fists. He had to do something. Anything. He turned to his communications officer. Send a surrender signal. The officer hesitated. Admiral, are you sure? The Excelneri did not surrender. Ever. It was against everything they believed in. Against everything they had built their empire upon. But at this moment, pride meant nothing. Survival was all that mattered. Do it, Zalthar ordered. The officer swallowed hard and activated the transmission. A distress signal was sent on all frequencies. A universal message. We surrender. We surrender. Ceasefire. We surrender. The bridge fell silent. All they could do now was wait. Seconds passed. Then minutes. But there was no response. Zalthar's claws dug into the armrests of his command chair. Why aren't they answering? Before anyone could respond, the ship's main screen flickered. The grainy image of a human officer appeared. He was calm, standing with his hands behind his back. His uniform bore no markings of rank, but Zalthar knew this was the one in command. The human studied them for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, in a voice cold as the void, he spoke. Surrender. He almost sounded amused. Tell me, Admiral, did the Excelneri cease fire when they burned human colonies to ash? Did you surrender when you slaughtered defenseless civilians? Zalthar's throat tightened. He knew where this was going. No, the human continued. You didn't. You showed no mercy. And now you ask for it. The screen went dark. The transmission ended. And in that moment, Zalthar knew there would be no mercy. A deep hum resonated through the remains of the Excelneri fleet. The Iron Fang was powering up again. And this time, it was not holding back. Zalthar whipped around. Weapons, fire everything we have left. His officers obeyed instantly. The surviving Excelneri warships unleashed their final desperate attack. A wall of plasma, torpedoes, and energy beams erupted toward the human warship. For a brief moment, hope flickered in Zalthar's chest. Maybe, just maybe, they cooled. The Iron Fang disappeared. Not like before. Not as a trick. It simply blinked out of existence. The Excelneri weapons continued forward, striking only empty space. Nothing. No explosion. No impact. Then it reappeared, right above them. For the first time, Zalthar truly saw it. Up close. It was not like any warship he had ever encountered. It did not have exposed weapons or armor plating. Instead, its surface shifted, as if it was alive, as if it was something beyond technology. And then, in a single instant, everything changed. The Iron Fang fired one shot. Just one. A pulse of pure energy rippled through space, washing over the Excelneri fleet like an invisible wave. It made no sound. It left no light. But the effect was immediate. Every remaining Excelneri ship went dark. Their engines failed. Their weapons melted into useless slag. The flagship's bridge was plunged into eerie silence as systems flickered and died. Zalthar watched in horror as the Iron Fang slowly turned, its dark form reflecting the burning remains of his once mighty fleet. And then, for the first time in his long, battle-hardened life, Admiral Zalthar felt something he had never known before. Helplessness. This was not just defeat. This was extinction. Darkness swallowed the Excelneri fleet. Their warships, once mighty symbols of conquest, now drifted powerless in the void. The Iron Fang had unleashed a single pulse, silent, invisible, and absolute. It did not destroy them in the traditional sense. It took from them. Their weapons were dead. Their engines refused to ignite. Even their emergency power reserves were gone. Admiral Zalthar stood motionless on his bridge. The glow of the control panels had faded to nothing. The hum of the ship's core was silent. He could hear his own breathing. sharp and unsteady. Around him, his officers whispered in terrified voices. "Nothing is responding. I can't see anything on the scanners. We've lost life support. The officer cut himself off, not because he was interrupted, because his voice, along with every other sound on the ship, had simply stopped. Zolthar opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He could feel the vibrations in his throat, but there was no sound. His entire crew had gone deaf. No, not deaf. The Iron Fang had taken sound itself from their ship. Zolthar's mind struggled to process it. This was not advanced technology. This was something beyond understanding. The bridge lighting flickered for a brief moment. Then, without warning, a single screen powered on. A human figure stood there, dimly lit, the same man from before. His lips moved, and somehow the XLMary could hear his voice perfectly, even though no other sound existed. "I want you to understand something, Admiral." Zolthar felt his pulse hammer in his chest. He had never feared an enemy before, but this was no ordinary enemy. The human leaned forward slightly, his expression as calm as before. "War was never a game to us. It was never about conquest or power. It was about survival." The bridge screen flickered, and suddenly, Zolthar saw a series of images. Human colonies burning, civilians executed, planets turned into wastelands. Zelnary victories. Then the images changed. Zolthar saw his own fleet, not as it was now, but from before, when they had been the hunters, when they had invaded human space, laughing at their weakness. Then the final image appeared, a single Zelnary warlord standing over human prisoners, a plasma blade in hand. The blade came down. The screen cut back to the human officer. His expression had not changed, but there was something in his eyes now. "A promise. You never expected us to survive," the human said. "You never thought we would fight back. And now, you beg for mercy." Zolthar's breath came in shallow gasps. He had to say something. He had to reason with them. He forced his voice to work. We underestimated you," he said slowly. His throat felt dry. He hesitated. He had never spoken these words before. "We were wrong." The human nodded slightly, as if acknowledging the Admiral's rare admission. "But tell me, Admiral," he continued, his voice as cold as the void, "did your kind ever show mercy to the weak?" The screen flickered again. The image changed. Now it showed Zelnary homeworlds. Zolthar's eyes widened. His entire species' planets, their grand cities, their towering citadels, all of it was displayed on the human ship's console. The Iron Fang had not just won the battle. It had every Zelnary world in its sights. Zolthar's hands trembled. What are you going to do?" For the first time, the human officer smiled. And it was not a smile of kindness. It was the smile of judgment. Zolthar had never felt powerless before. Not when he led invasions that crushed civilizations. Not when he ordered entire worlds to burn. Even in the heat of battle, when faced with the unknown, he had always believed in control, in the certainty that the Zelnary Empire would always prevail. But now, on the darkened bridge of his disabled flagship, watching the human officer smile with quiet certainty, he realized the truth. They were no longer conquerors. They were prey. The screen remained fixed on the image of Zelnary homeworlds. Grand cities, war factories, colony stations, everything was there. Their entire empire, mapped with disturbing precision. Zolthar's claws dug into his palms. "How?" he whispered. His voice barely made a sound. "How do you have this information?" The human officer tilted his head slightly. "We've been watching you for a long time, Admiral. Studying, learning." His smile faded. "The way you fight, the way you think, the way you destroy." Zolthar's heart pounded. He had always believed humans were nothing but a lesser species. Weaker, primitive, incapable of understanding true war. But now, looking into the cold, calculating eyes of the human before him, he saw no weakness, only something far worse. Vengeance. Zolthar forced his voice to remain steady. You've won. You've destroyed our fleet. But if you attack our homeworlds, you will start a war greater than anything you've seen before. The human chuckled. It was a low, quiet sound, filled with certainty. Admiral, I think you still misunderstand the situation. The screen flickered again. This time, Zolthar saw something that made his blood run cold. The Selneri homeworld. Not just a static image. Live footage. Zolthar's capital city, the beating heart of the Selneri Empire, was in flames. Smoke billowed from the towering citadels. Explosions rippled through the skyline. Ships fell from the sky like burning meteors. It wasn't an attack. It was destruction. Zolthar staggered back. No, he breathed. This is a trick. The human's voice remained calm. You still think this is a war? He leaned forward. It's not. The footage zoomed in. Selneri warriors, once proud, feared across the stars, ran through the streets, chased by mechanized drones that tore through them like paper. The camera panned to a towering statue in the city's central plaza. It was a monument of the first Selneri emperor, a symbol of their power. As Zolthar watched, the statue collapsed, detonated from within. The pieces crashed to the ground, shattering into dust. And then, the human flag rose in its place. Zolthar's breath caught in his throat. It wasn't just an invasion. It was an end. He turned back to the human on the screen. His voice, once filled with authority, now trembled. You wouldn't destroy an entire species. The human's expression remained unchanged. Wouldn't we? The screen flickered again. More footage, more planets, every Selneri homeworld, every colony, each one burning. Zolthar's knees felt weak. His empire, the greatest force in the galaxy, was dying. This is genocide, he whispered. The human's eyes darkened. No, this is justice. Silence. Then, for the first time since the battle began, the human's voice softened. You never expected this, did you? He exhaled slowly. For centuries, you ruled through terror. You burned planets. You wiped out species that didn't bow to you, and you thought that made you invincible. He leaned closer. But all it did was teach us how to end you. Zolthar's mind raced. There had to be something he could do. Some way to stop this. His fleet was gone. His empire was collapsing. But he was still alive. And as long as he lived, he could still fight. His voice hardened. We will rebuild. His claws tightened into fists. You may have won this battle, but the Selneri will rise again. We are survivors. We will come back stronger. For the first time, the human's expression changed. His smile returned. Not cruel, not angry, but amused. You think this is the end of a battle? His voice dropped, becoming almost a whisper. No, Admiral. He leaned in. This is the end of the Selneri. And then, in one final act of absolute dominance, he reached forward and shut the screen off. Zolthar stared at the dead screen, his breath shallow, his mind racing. The human had ended the transmission, but the silence that followed was far worse. It wasn't just the silence of a disabled ship, of a lost battle. It was the silence of an empire dying. His bridge crew sat frozen in their seats, too stunned to speak. Some still desperately tapped at controls that no longer worked, as if sheer willpower could restore their systems. Others simply stared at the screen, at the wreckage outside, at the darkness that surrounded them. No one could process what had just happened. For centuries, the Selneri had been the supreme power of the galaxy. Their fleets had crushed rebellion. Their armies had erased civilizations. Their warlords had ruled with unquestioned might. They had never lost a war. Until now. Zolthur forced himself to stand. His legs felt heavy, his body weak. "Status report," he ordered. His officers hesitated before responding. "Our engines are still offline. Weapons, non-functional. Life support failing. We have maybe an hour before." The officer stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Zolthur gritted his teeth. An hour. That was all the time they had left before the oxygen ran out, before the cold of space claimed them. He turned back to the massive viewing window. The Iron Fang still loomed in the distance, watching, waiting. It had already won, but it wasn't leaving. Because this wasn't just about winning a war. This was punishment. A deep hum suddenly vibrated through the ship, not from their systems, but from outside. The Iron Fang was moving again. Its surface rippled like liquid metal, shifting, reshaping, adapting. And then, something else appeared. A new fleet, but not a Selnary fleet. More human warships emerged from the darkness, massive and silent. Their hulls unlike anything Zolthur had ever seen before. They didn't move like traditional ships. They glided, bending space around them, as if they weren't bound by the same physics as everything else. The Iron Fang had been terrifying enough. Now, there were hundreds of them. Zolthur clenched his fists. "They mean to erase us completely." His second-in-command finally found his voice. "Admiral, we have to try and negotiate." Zolthur exhaled slowly. He had already tried to beg for mercy, and the humans had ignored him. But maybe if they offered something, a secret, technology, something. Before he could speak, the ship's emergency lights flickered. And then, to his utter shock, a new transmission came through. The screen turned back on. The same human officer appeared, but this time there was no amusement in his eyes. No anger, only finality. "Admiral Zolthur," the human said. His voice was calm, controlled, absolute. "This is your final moment." Zolthur's throat felt dry. "If you do this," he forced out, "you become no better than us." The human tilted his head slightly. "You misunderstand, Admiral." He leaned forward, and his next words sent a chill through Zolthur's very soul. "We are not here for vengeance." The screen flickered again. More footage appeared, live footage, not of destruction, not of war, of Selnary civilians, survivors. Zolthur's eyes widened. "You." He could barely speak. "You didn't kill them." The human nodded. "No." The screen changed again. This time, it showed Selnary prisoners, but they were not in chains. They were not executed. They were being escorted into massive human ships. Evacuated. Zolthur's mind reeled. The humans had the power to erase the Selnary completely, to commit total genocide. And yet, they hadn't. They had destroyed the empire, wiped out its military, shattered its rule, but they had spared the innocent. The human on the screen met Zolthur's gaze. "Unlike you, we do not kill simply because we can." The words stung, because they were true. Zolthur had ordered planetary purges without hesitation. He had slaughtered millions because it was efficient, because it was necessary. And now, the very species he had considered weak was proving itself stronger than he had ever been. "We are not monsters," the human continued. "But your empire is finished. The Selnary will never again rule through terror, never again command fleets to burn planets." His eyes narrowed. "And you, Admiral, will not live to see what comes next." Zolthur stiffened. His claws twitched. "If you are truly merciful, then you will let me go with my people." The human officer exhaled slowly. "Mercy," he said quietly, "is for those who deserve it." Zolthur didn't have time to respond. Because in the next instant, the Iron Fang fired one last time. Not a weapon, not an explosion. A pulse. Zolthur's body froze. Every nerve, every muscle. paralyzed. He could still think, still feel, but he could not move. He was trapped inside his own body. His officers suffered the same fate. All of them, locked in place, aware, but helpless. The human officer spoke one last time. "This is your fate, Admiral. You will drift here, watching the remains of your empire fade into nothing. Conscious, aware, unable to move, unable to speak." He leaned closer. "And you will have eternity to think about what you've done." The screen went dark. The Iron Fang turned away, leaving the fleet of frozen Selnari warships behind. The human fleet gathered the civilians, their transports disappearing into the stars. The last survivors of a fallen empire. And then, one by one, the human ships vanished, leaving nothing but a dead battlefield and a fleet of silent ghosts. Selnari warships drifting forever, their crews trapped in their own bodies, staring into the endless void, unable to scream. The Selnari Empire was no more, and humanity had become the new gods of the galaxy.